Hello, YouTubers, and welcome to Level-Headed News. This is your host, Brenda. I have 10 articles in this episode for you. Information out of Washington and surrounding. All the URLs are in the description of the video for your convenience. First one we have here is off of Liberty Headlines, and it says, "The potentially unconstitutional Obamacare feature everyone is ignoring." Came from the Daily Caller News Foundation. It says President Donald Trump and Speaker of the House Paul Ryan have said they are willing to let Obamacare implode, but doing so tactically. I'm not sure how it's pronounced. Let's put it that way. Let's a potentially unconstitutional program continue. Under the leadership of former Speaker John Boehner, the House filed suit against the Obama administration in 2014, claiming it was illegally reimbursed, marking, geez, my tongue's tied. Under the leadership of former Speaker John Boehner, the House filed suit against the Obama administration in 2014, claiming it was illegally reimbursing marketplace insurers for a little-known feature of Obamacare reductions called the CSRs. Insurers are required under the current system to provide CSRs low and moderate income individuals who participate in the exchange. Consumers the game, Obamacare raised deductibles to levels that are tough for many Americans to meet without some financial support. CSRs were instituted to help insurers with the cost of patients can't otherwise meet. Is rather straightforward. Insurers cover the cost of patients' deductible, and the federal government reimburses the provider for what they pay out. Leadership felt that CSRs required an additional appropriation approved by Congress. That because Congress had never explicitly appropriated the funds for those payments, the administration's actions, after nearly 2 years of deliberation, U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia, Rosemary M. Collier, ruled May the 12th of 2016 with the House. Then appealed the decision. The case remains open with no definitive ruling. Republicans have pushed back the court date twice. In February, Trump and Ryan got a hold approved until May the 22nd. The result of the appeal and numerous Republican-led delays is that CSRs as they were when the Obama administration first appealed. CSRs are funded unconstitutionally, according to Collier's decision. We'll soon have to come to a decision for the Obama administration's appeal. If the pair decide to forward the appeal, the ruling is upheld, Trump will step closer to their goal of dismantling Obamacare. The appeal, however, could bring a host of economic and political problems upon the new administration. If Trump decides to let Obamacare implode and withdraws the appeal, he will effectively leave insurers with up to $7 billion in bad debt and consumers with back-breaking premiums. Some $7 billion is allocated to CSRs this year, and another $10 billion is slated for 2018. The problem then for Trump and Republican leadership is that they don't fund the program. They put insurers who are already paying out billions in CSRs in hot water, leaving them without any chance of reimbursement. Even if Republicans decide to postpone decision-making until 2018, the same problem presents itself. Due to the way Obamacare is structured, if Trump and Ryan choose to not reimburse insurers for the CSRs, insurers would be forced to increase plan premiums. Will not simply eat the difference between what the enrollee pays and what they are left to cover. Will be shifted to the larger consumer base through higher premiums, according to the research of Health and Human Services and the Urban Institute. Higher premiums would translate into higher federal costs. in the form of increased premium tax credits, or PTCs. It presents a fiscal policy dilemma for the federal government, as more people are eligible for PTCs than CSRs, which would lead to substance increases in federal costs, Health and Human Service reports. Obamacare insurance exchanges coverage options into tiers, which are defined based on respective cost to insurers versus the consumer. The majority of consumers have silver plans, which also act as the base metric for PTCs. Silver plans have an actuarial value, or AV, of 70%, meaning that the insurer covers 70% of all healthcare costs, while enrollees pay the remaining 30% through deductibles, copays, and coinsurance. If the federal government reimbursed for CSRs, insurers would have to increase silver plan premiums to make up the difference. The majority of consumers selecting silver plans typically have income levels that qualify them for CSRs, and average AV of silver plans, taking into account CSRs, is about 85%. If consumers' preferences remain unchanged, premiums for silver plans would have to increase percent change in AV. Researchers warn that such a situation would drive large swath of customers to change their respective insurance plans, which would cause insurance providers to increase premiums for silver plans as much as 30%, or $1,040 per person on average, reports. One of the main problems with Obamacare are the skyrocketing premiums. Insurers pull out of marketplaces where it is not cost effective for them to provide services, and as a result, consumers are left with fewer options at higher prices. Following a humiliating defeat in Congress, have revamped their effort to repeal and replace Obamacare, and conservatives held meetings on Monday to discuss the future of the Republican repeal effort. Ryan said Monday, new plans are simply in the conceptual stage right now, at a timeline for when the next bill would hit the House floor for a vote. Next article is off of BizPac Review. And the hamster's running in the wheel. Legislation to hold Veterans Affairs employees accountable faces major Senate hurdle. A bill to give the Department of Veterans Affairs Secretary David Skulkin authority to quickly fire incompetent employees faces a major battle in the Senate, although it has his backing. He passed the House. Shulkin came out in favor of the legislation after realizing he couldn't immediately fire an employee caught watching pornography at work, and now 7 key senators are backing this legislation after it was introduced on the Senate side by GOP Senator Marco Rubio. Those are Republicans Tim Scott, Jeff Flake, Thomas Tillis, Tom Toomey, and Mike Lee, and yet it's possible that Democrats could kill the bill passed. While VA Accountability First Act of 2017 passed the House, only 10 Democrats voted in support. The House Committee on Veterans Affairs, Democratic Representative Tim Walz voted against the bill. It has not yet been scheduled. After the House passed the bill last month, I'm hopeful the Senate will take up our legislation soon, Rubio told the Daily Signal. Administration's strong support bring real accountability to the VA, do right by our veterans, and help them get the quality care they have earned. Republican Senator Johnny Atkinson, chairman of the Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs, said he is ready to cooperate with Democrats to get the legislation passed. I'm committed to moving legislation, Secretary Skulkin, the tools to discipline bad employees. The Daily Signal. Accountability reform is top priority, and I look forward to continuing to work with Chairman and Ranking Member Tim Walz, as VA Committee Ranking Member John Tester, and Secretary Shulkin. to accomplish this goal. To cooperate with Democrats last year on bipartisan legislation to speed up firing of incompetent employees, but that legislation stalled after passing his committee, which reduces the chance of the VA Accountability First Act, given that it's much more aggressive. The importance of collecting bargaining rights and due process in their decision to oppose the legislation, and Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal, in particular, was instrumental in Trudeau's previous bill in late 2015 by blocking a rush vote. Of government employees, which serves as the union for VA employees, has denounced the bill multiple times in the past. Instead of hiring 5,000 frontline caregivers our veterans desperately need, they'd rather spend their time sticking it to the people who serve veterans every day, AFGE National President David Cox said. But the tide turning. In 2016, Secretary Sloan Gibson admitted that it was simply too hard to terminate bad employees. The inability to remove incompetent and corrupt employees has brought major scandal on the department. To fire an employee who engaged in armed robbery or even disciplined who participated in a surgery on a veteran while intoxicated. Whether Republicans in the Senate will be able to muster enough votes to get a VA accountability bill to President Donald Trump remains to be seen. Democratic opposition. But unlike his predecessor, Trump is likely to sign the bill as soon as it reaches his desk instead of issuing a veto. Article is off of Liberty Headlines. Israel's feds over climate change flip-flop from Obama to Trump. With 2 weeks left in Barack Obama's presidency, lawyers for the government acknowledged in a court filing that climate change is caused by humans. Its effects could be catastrophic. Who the document couldn't tell a judge whether Trump administration would now reverse its position and deny that climate change is real. Guidance from on high, so we don't know yet, Justice Department lawyer told U.S. Magistrate Judge Thomas Coffin on Friday's hearing in the Wayne Morris. Nearly 24 teens and climate scientists, James Hansen, sued the federal government in August of 2015, claiming the government has known for half a decade that climate change impairs the future of humanity, but by continuing to hand subsidies and permits to the fossil fuel industry polluters. The government issued an answer to the complaint that acknowledged many of the kids' allegations was true. Since the election of President Donald Trump, the government has slashed the budget for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, deleted scientific data from the agency's website, and issued a gag order for agency employees. That made the task uncertain for kids lawyer Julia Olson. Olson demanded evidence from the government going back until at least 1965 that she said would show the government's deliberate the government's deliberate indifference to the hazards it was causing by failing to stop climate change. Often suggested that was unnecessary. The government has admitted a number of significant omissions the plaintiffs made in their complaint, the judge said. The government's answer to the complaint, listing a fraction of the dozens of claims from the lawsuit that the government had agreed were true. Here it says, to quote just some, you have admitted that global atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide are at an unprecedented high level compared to the past 8 years of historical data and pose risk to human health and welfare. To 2012, carbon dioxide emissions from within the United States comprise more than 25% of global emissions. Scientific consensus that the buildup of greenhouse gases due to human activities is changing the global climate at a pace and in a way that threatens human health and environment. Daily average atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations exceeded 400 parts per million for the first time in millions of years. Average carbon dioxide concentrations reached levels unprecedented for at least 2.6 million years, and that the Earth has now warmed at about 0.9 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial temperatures, he said. That climate change is damaging human and natural systems, increasing the risk of loss of life and requiring adaptation larger and faster scales than current species have successfully achieved in the past, potentially increasing the risk or disruption for many species, and projected atmospheric concentrations of greenhouse gases threaten the public health and welfare of current and future generations. And this threat time as greenhouse gases continue to accumulate in the atmosphere ever greater rates of climate change. That human activity is likely to have been the dominant cause of observed warming since the mid-1900s, which is likely to increase cancer, cardiovascular disease, stroke, mental health, and stress disorders. Judge Coffin then asked whether the Justice Department, now under the authority of Attorney General Jeff Sessions and President Trump, planned to walk back everything it had acknowledged in the case under the previous administration. Officially retreated from any of these admissions, Coffin asked. Are these admissions not binding on the government? Made in the government's answer? Duffy, the same attorney with the Justice Department who signed the answer from which the judge had just read aloud, said he didn't know. Certainly could move to amend to the extent of any, or try this again, to the extent any of its positions are different, Duffy said. However, we do not have a position from leadership, and I could not say with certainty one way or the other yet. Countered, the reason I ask is because I don't live in a vacuum. Media accounts that the administration has rolled back many of the regulations that were in place regarding greenhouse gases. It has slashed budget substantially that was intended to combat climate change and has announced plans to increase significantly the fossil fuel discussed in this lawsuit. To what position the government is going to be taking. Silent for about 20 seconds. Any comment on that? Judge Coffin asked. There was another pause. All I can tell you is that I read the executive order, and the order itself does not roll back regulations, although I would not characterization incorrect, Duffy said. Your characterization is correct. Attorney for 3 oil and manufacturing associations who intervened as defendants in the case also declined to indicate his client's position on climate change. I'm not sure why the inventor's position is relevant, Volpe said. The response the government made is their response. Why would the defendants need to wade into this area? Judge Coffin explained the relevance. Is, if I was trying this case, I would be wondering, what is your position on climate change, he said. Is it consistent with the government's? You said the role of interveners is to offer expert testimony. Expert on what subject are the interveners going to take? Volpe changed the subject to the red herrings he said were raising. Judge Coffin then encouraged Olson and her clients to limit their arguments to the science behind their claims and the dangers facing full generations if climate change continues. Given the admissions of the government that government is admitting, yes, there are human-caused climate changes, and yes, it's going to have severe effect on human lives going forward if it continues, including causing extinction of certain species. Given those admissions, my question to the plaintiff is, why do you need to show who knew what and when and why? And why? Where are we today, as opposed to demonstrating the facts of climate change and the dangers going forward unless remedies are put into place to address it, the judge asked. We need to get the specifics of when they knew and what they knew when they admit they know it today, he added. She wanted to lay the groundwork for future appeals. So a systematic pattern for decades of knowing the destructive potential of climate change and then making choices to continue a path through federal approvals put us in the catastrophic position we're in, Olson said. We want to present the best possible evidence and want to have solid appeal one day to take and ultimately to the Supreme Court. Ask the courts to rule on whether it can appeal its refusal to dismiss the Ninth Circuit, that he would do his best to expedite the ruling. The article we have is off BizPac Review. It says, "Who stole my president?" Hard on Trump's promise to stay out of the Middle East. In the wake of President Trump's decision to seemingly abandon the principles of foreign non-intervention that helped propel him to the presidency, many of his during the campaign haven't been shy about their expressing of disappointment. When the president himself, as a private citizen, clearly understood the fact very little has gone well when it becomes involved in the Middle East. Granted, it's important for all sides not to rush to judgment yet. Playing with fire here, there's a huge difference between specifically targeted strikes designed to send a message and so-called regime change, which cannot possibly work. However, it could be an ominous fact that the media, Democrats, and neocons all seem to be on the Trump train now, at least on this issue, while those who support him from the beginning to a significant degree because he was non-interventionist are disappointing. President Trump has already done a lot of good for conservatives and will continue to do so, but if his presidency gets bogged down in another pointless war in the Middle East, be all he'll get to make it. Trump puts out a tweet, says many Syrian rebels are radical jihadists, not our friends, and supporting them doesn't serve our nation or our national interest. Stay out of Syria, he says. And then Katie Hopkins puts out a tweet, says, "Who stole my president?" Who stole my president indeed. There's also this. Trump put out a tweet that says, now that Obama's poll numbers are in a tailspin, watch for him to launch a strike in Libya or Iran. He's desperate. And that was put out October the 9th of 2012. June the 15th of 2013, he put out a tweet that said, we should stay the hell out of Syria. The rebels are just as bad as the current regime. What will we get for our lives in dollars? Zero. Conservative author, commentator, and ardent Trump supporter Ann Coulter, the author In Trump We Trust, released a scathing showed that may no longer be the case. She tweets out, Trump campaign on not getting involved in the Middle East, said it always helps our enemies and creates more refugees. A picture on TV. He told us he would be the president of America and not the world. Could somebody show him pictures of Americans raped and killed by illegals? There are nearly 50,000 comments on this Breitbart news story about Syrian attacks, 99% negative, she says. I don't care if Assad did it or not. It's none of our business, and we shouldn't be policing the world again. We know when strong men go and a vacuum of power is left over. What follows Assad? What follows Saddam, Gaddafi? 15 years, 6 heroes, 500,000 massacred Christians. For what? The pond. Some key UKIP Trump allies are upset with this decision as well. Nigel Farage put out a tweet, says, many Trump voters will be worried about this military intervention. Where will it end? Put out a tweet that says, the U.S. bombing of Syria last night was rash, trigger-happy, nonsensical, and will achieve nothing. I hope for better. And plenty of politicians and media figures in the United States tweeted out. Rand Paul says, Syria airstrikes not in the national interest. Mario Monte tweeted out, to conservative radio host Michael Savage just listed the attack on Syria must listen. And she's got a link in her tweet for that. And there's a bunch more of those and some video if you care to take a look at that. Conservative Tribune, and it says Ben Carson audits HUD, $100 billion in errors. Happen. Cutting the size of government isn't brain surgery. However, as Dr. Ben Carson has just proved over in urban development, it doesn't seem necessary, or try that again, it necessarily hurt to have a brain surgeon doing it. According to an audit reportedly released by HUD on March the 1st, just a month into his tenure, Donald Trump's cabinet, Carson's department, total of $500 billion. Oops, it's jumping on me. Hamster's going berserk here. I'm overworking him. Come on, hamster. Program. Okay. Carson's department found a staggering total of nearly $520 billion in accounting errors. Yes, you read that right. Billions. How in the hell? Gotta wonder if extortion's involved in that. Okay, it goes on. It says the audit was conducted due to pervasive material errors that we identified. According to the report, our objective was to express an opinion on the fairness of HUD's consolidated financial statements in accordance with U.S. general acceptance accounting principles applicable to. So the total amounts of errors corrected in HUD's notes and consolidated financial statements were $18.4 billion and $3.4 billion respectively, the report read. The hamster's running as fast as he can go. That wasn't all. There were several other unresolved audit matters which restricted our ability to obtain sufficient appropriate evidence to express an opinion. These unresolved audit matters related to Office of General Counsel's refusal to sign the management representation letter. Number two, HUD's improper use of cumulative and first in, first out budgetary accounts dispersing community planning and development program funds. Number three, the $4.2 billion in non-pooled loan assets from Ginnie Mae's financial statements that we could not audit due to inadequate support. Number four, the improper accounting for certain and accounts, or try that again, HUD assets and liabilities. And five, material differences between HUD's general ledger accounts. This audit contains 11 material weaknesses, 7 deficiencies, and 5 instances of non-compliance with applicable laws and regulations. They also reported that auditors reported the problems were due to an inability to establish a control environment, financial accounting systems, retain and identify appropriate accounting principles and policies. So in other words, they were incompetent. The fact that mismanagement in housing and urban development is ranking up $520 billion in errors is simply mind-boggling. That a brain surgeon is on call at HUD, we can only hope he brings a lot of accountants to the team. Of Washington Times. Obama IRS, whoops, hamster's falling off the wheel here. Obama IRS gave Satan Club creator fast tax-exempt status. By a government watchdog showed that the originator of the after-school Satan Club received speedy tax-exempt status, while conservative groups were stuck in bureaucratic red tape under the Obama administration. Files obtained by Judicial Watch last week show Reason Alliance in Somerville, Massachusetts was given nonprofit status 10 days of its application in 2019. The group operates the Satanic Washington State and planned Satan Club initiative in 2016. Internal Revenue Service conservative groups wait years for tax-exempt status. An after-school Satan Club, launched to hinder Christian-based counterparts, got its nonprofit ranking in just 10 days, Judicial Watch said in a statement. 16th, the classification to charitable, religious, and educational organizations that operate as nonprofits. Under the Obama administration, IRS political appointees legally targeted conservative groups, either making them wait up to 7 years for tax-exempt status altogether. That Reason Alliance's application turned up after Freedom Information related to IRS approval process. The fact that a satanic cult granted in a week, conservative group 7 years to get approved, should be pretty illustrative of a deeper problem here. Brian Morgenstern, vice president of the Manhattan Republican Party, told Fox News on Monday, which was started by directors Malcolm Jerry and Douglas Mincer, says that the mission is to encourage reason and empathy, reject tyrannical authority, promote justice, and advocate pragmatic idea for after-school Satan Club was billed as an alternative to an evangelical Christian group after school program known as the Good News Club. If Good News Club in churches rather than public schools, that need would disappear. But our point is that one religion into the public schools, you have to let others. Otherwise, it's an establishment of religion, the group said. Post on 2016. Being simple political ploy and into being very sincere movement that seeks to separate religion. Article of the Gateway Pundit, and it says lawmakers demand firing of Obama IRS Commission Kozagnan. More than 30 lawmakers sent a letter to President Trump on Thursday calling for Obama's IRS commissioner down from his post. Term, Fox News reports. House Oversight and Government Reform Committee Chairman Jason Chavez, Republican of Utah, and 37 House members sent a letter which accused Kozagnan of providing false testimony to Congress and obstructing the congressional investigation, targeting of conservative political groups. So long as the IRS commissioner is a man, the people destroyed evidence and failed his legal duties to the people's representatives. The IRS is not controlled by the people, the letter reads. For that reason, we request your immediate remove Kozagnan. Testified before the committee on Thursday, where he reaffirmed his commitment to staying on until the end of his 5-year term, which is on November the 13th, unless President Trump removes him. He has said he didn't intend to mislead Congress and didn't mean to lose key fiasco. First time President Trump urging him to force Kozagnan to resign. In January, Republican Study Committee Chairman Mark Walker, Republican of North Carolina, along with 53 other House Republicans, also wrote a letter asking Trump to remove him for the end of his term. Judicial Watch has also been, after they discovered IRS agents had admitted to improperly targeting conservative groups. Judicial Watch even started a petition to impeach Kozagnan. The IRS is just another agency that Obama administration used as a weapon against conservatives. Kozagnan must be impeached immediately and brought to justice. There's some tweets here if you want to pull them up and read those. The next article is off of BizPac Review. And it says, fact checking will now be part of your Google search results. This is bad. bad news here. Google has announced a new weapon in the war against fake news. The internet search giant unveiled a new feature that will allow fact-checking to appear right in the search results. Put out a tweet that says, some exciting news from Google. Fact-checking will now be part of your search results. The first time when you conduct a search on Google that returns an authoritative result containing fact checks for one or more public claims, and clearly on the search results page, Google announced in a post on Friday. The snippet will display information on the claim, who made the claim of that particular claim. The fact-checking will be left to third parties like PolitiFact and Snopes, with more than 100 organizations, including the Associated Press, the BBC, Washington Post, New York Times, part of the fact-checking community. Fact alone raised eyebrows on Twitter, and the first Twitter here is a picture of those two buffoons that come up with Snopes. It says that Google will be using to check political facts. Henceforth, this not a joke, ladies and gentlemen. Meet Snopes. Another one says the biggest fake news sites on the planet, CNN, BBC, Google, add search results fact check flag. Another one says, oh, nice. Nothing like going even deeper to push agenda versus encouraging critical thinkers. Sorry, intelligent people won't drink the Kool-Aid. Information won't be available for every search result, and there may be search result pages where different publishers checked the same claim and reached different conclusions, Google noted. These fact checkers are not Google and are presented so people can make more informed judgments, Google said. Even though differing conclusions may be presented, helpful for people to understand the degree of consensus around a particular claim and have clear information on which sources agree. Publishers will be able to add notes like true or mostly false next to the checked stories, but Google algorithms will determine which ones will appear. Many other media outlets and organizations to combat the spread of false information on the internet, a problem that has made headlines since 2016 election season. While some social media users welcomed the news, others were wary of what seemed like Orwellian attacks. Huge news from Google. Fact checks will now be highlighted in searches. Another one says Google fights fake news in search with fact check tags. Another one says great move by a great company. Google will soon introduce fact check tag authentication. And there's a whole slew of those tweets if you want to read those. The next one is off conservative. It says CNN is facing a massive racial discrimination lawsuit. Its record as fake news outlet has officially become the least of CNN's problems, as a racial class action discrimination suit filed against the network last year has recently grown to include hundreds of current employees of the organization. Although initially filed by just 2 plaintiffs, the suit was amended last month to include more than 175 people, both former and current employees of the defendant, requesting the punitive class action according to a motion filed in the lawsuit. According to the Hollywood Reporter, the suit alleged received lower performance ratings in evaluations, that there are dramatic differences in pay between similarly situated employees of different races, and that the promotion of African American employees is blocked by a glass ceiling. This was a bad look for CNN, would be an understatement, though sadly enough, a cursory glance at Google search results, network peers in the liberal mainstream media suit. And there's an inset here from Google, search results about the racial discrimination lawsuit. It says, as of Thursday morning, only 3 results showed up, one from Hollywood Reporter and one from The Root, a black culture website, other than publishers there was dead silence. In trying to explain this discrepancy, the Daily Wire editor-at-large, John Nolte, pointed us as part of the resistance against President Donald Trump, a leader and useful confederate in the fake news propaganda wars against the president, a sacred cow that must be protected by the rest of the media, even if that means allowing this alleged discrimination against blacks to continue on unpunished. He was likely correct, especially considering that we're one to search Google for information about recently settled sexual discrimination lawsuits against Fox News host Bill O'Reilly, one would find an endless array of results. This was despite the fact that the suits against O'Reilly against him, whereas the suit against CNN was targeted at the whole network, a place where superiors were reportedly known to ask questions such as who would be worth more, black slaves from past times or new slaves. But because the perpetrators in this case were their allies in the fake news war against President Donald Trump, there was nothing but silence. The article that I have for you this morning is off of BizPac Review. It says, is it time for a commission on American exceptionalism? On Higher Education is recommending President Donald Trump establish a blue ribbon commission on American exceptionalism with historians, entrepreneurs, and experts to counter the left's cancerous narrative that America has irredeemable flaws. College produces people who think that the great lesson they've learned is that Western civilization is rotten to the core, that America is an experiment in hypocrisy, and the only thing we can do is overturn what our forefathers have handed down to us. Peter Wood, a leader in higher education reform, says. Wood is the president of the National Association of Scholars, called NAS, profit-based in New York that defends intellectual freedom and free speech in higher education. He attended a White House meeting recently where he recommended the Trump White House launch a blue ribbon commission. American higher education took the news of Trump's election quite badly, he says in his exclusive video interview for the Daily Caller News Foundation. As colleagues appear to be the home base of the Trump resistance movement, Wood says students are demonstrating their utter ignorance of colleges, the systems America uses to select a president. Wood blames Republicans who have turned their backs on higher education for 50 years. He says we are seeing the consequences of a system of well-funded corruption on the part of Congress, which flows into higher education to work as kind of a jobs program for retired politicians. Ideological zealotry abounds. Conservatives on the faculty are almost non-existent, and the students are subjected to 4 years of intense indoctrination, he says. Members of the media and Hollywood have attended American colleges. The scholar claims the result of that is that we have an educated public in this country now mal-educated. Issued an explosive report this year called Making Citizens, making of American citizens through activism training and increasing incidents of tyranny for progressive agitation and causes. Surprised to learn that in accordance with the United Nations and former President Barack Obama's ideology, amorphous, there we go, world citizenry is being learned as preferable to American citizenship, despite the positive attributes of respect for individual liberty, rule of law, opportunity, and civil order in our founding documents. Students and fair-minded professors are experimenting toxic, illiberal political correctness on American campuses. The tactic seen by the left, Wood says, includes increasingly silence and delegitimizing their opposition. Means that punishment or students is meted veer from liberal orthodoxy. Is weighing in as Congress begins to consider the of Higher Education Act called the HEA of 1965. There are two policymakers signed by hundreds in early March promoting a link between the principles of intellectual freedom and tolerance with the federal resources for the first time. His Freedom to Learn amendments to the HEA are being discussed in Washington. Wood offers tangible advice to parents, donors, alumni, professors, and students who reject the orthodoxy. More people pay attention, fight back, support organizations like his, and only engage in stipulated financial giving based on what you know is not supporting infected programs, departments, or professors. The National Association of Scholars, you can click on a link here to see their website and read his commentary on the Middlebury College with Charles Murray. That's another link. The organization's Facebook page, there's a link to that. And you can follow the group on Twitter, and they have the link to that. That's all I have for you this morning. If you like what I'm doing here, give it a thumbs up, share it on your social media so everybody gets to hear the news. To subscribe, and that way you'll stay informed. Have a great day.